So welcome everybody. This is a session we've done for a number of years now, and it's a way to learn a little bit about some folks that have been around a little bit longer than some other folks.
Wow.
And have a wealth of insight and experience to share. If you may not know me, I'm Bill Bittner. And I have three of my favorite people up here
Today.
Until after this is over, then we're going to kill them.
Yeah, until 6 o'clock. All bets are off. I've lost control. So why don't I let each of you just briefly introduce yourself, who you are, where you're at now, and a fun fact.
Why don't we start down there?
All right.
Because I have to be
With the old guy.
Exactly.
Jesus.
My name is Smrcina. I'm with Velocity Software. I've been working with Velocity for 16 and a half years. I do product support, customer support, training, installs. I manage ZOS and VSE systems internally, and that's probably enough.
Wow. Okay. I am James Vincent. I also work for Velocity Software. I've been there 8 years, 8 glorious years. I totally love this job. I do. Development for Z-Pro and the product installer right now. Do a lot of what Rich said, a lot of helping customers. I worked for a small Midwest insurance company for 35 years. You may have heard of it, Nationwide Insurance. And that's where I cut my teeth on ZVM. So kind of grew up and moved out.
Phill Tully. I got a new title, I guess, 2 weeks ago. I now own all mainframe at Citibank. ZOS, ZVM, TPF, Stratus, Series 1, I don't know. I actually don't know all of this yet. So I'm learning because I have supported ZOS in the past. I have supported TPF in the past. Never iSeries or Stratus, so.
Well, the year's not over.
Exactly. So, so I've been doing VM for a number of years, 40 or so, in everything from air traffic to payroll to banks. So and I've been doing Linux, and I can actually pinpoint the day when I first installed Linux on S390.
You gonna share that with us?
December 31st, 1999.
That sounds about right.
I was stuck in the office for Y2K, and somebody from Maris sent me an email and said, why don't you try to install this? And I sat there and installed it. So
Nice.
yeah. So again, you got to keep learning. Go back to that session we were just in for the students. You got to keep learning.
Yeah. So let's go back, if we can remember. Well, I have been today. Sorry. Let me start over. Take two. Why don't we review how you got to the mainframe to begin with? 'Cause I think your journeys were a little bit different. And we'll go in reverse order this time. So, Phil.
Okay. Right out of college, my college, small New Jersey State College. Back then, we actually had mainframes for submit jobs and learn Fortran, learn COBOL. And my architecture class was taught by an assembler language programmer, and he taught computer architecture by how the assembler language issued the commands to the machine. And I thought it was hilarious. It was great. It was just really interesting. And I got a job doing air traffic control support, right? It just so happens the FAA's facility is in the same town as my college.
Okay.
So I got a job doing that, and I had to learn VM to do it. So.
Okay. Very cool. James?
I was introduced by my dad when I was in junior high. He worked for IBM in this little town called Endicott. And
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. He took me to work one day. I don't remember the exact title that they had for him back then, but he designed data center layouts for customers. So where everything, all the equipment went and whatever. So he took me in one weekend just to see what's going on. And he actually showed me how he laid out the design of the data centers on VM. I didn't know it at the time, but he used the VM system. But the thing that really stuck out for me was he took me into the data center and he's showing me what they do and some of the displays and all this stuff. And the keyboard was sitting there in front of the operator, and it had a green button and it had a red button. And I said, "What does that red button do?" He goes, "Makes the phone ring. Push it." I did. And within seconds, the phone rang. And he reached over and hit the green button. And of course, the operator said, "No, everything's fine." So that was my first introduction to operating a mainframe. That was
Nice.
Yeah, I don't remember what precipitated this, but I bought my first computer when I was a teenager. It was a Radio Shack color computer, if everybody remembers those, right? And learned programming on the Radio Shack color computer in BASIC. That's pretty much all it had. Wrote a lot of code, typed a lot of code in from the magazines of the day, and made it work. And eventually that became a college level activity when I got into a local technical college that had what they called the business data processing program at the time. It was basically programming and operations and systems analysis, and got into BASIC and COBOL and a little bit of PL1, a little bit of assembler, and the bug just stuck from there. Right out of college, I got a job at a company called Aldrich Chemical Company in Milwaukee. This is where I live, and basically worked my way up from what they call data control clerk to operator, to programming, and I always loved what the guys in the corner office were doing. They were the systems guys. They were the guys that would come in and enter all these commands on the console
And run away.
and shut down systems and bring up systems and all that kind of stuff. So that always fascinated me. One of the guys got caught playing Star Trek on the mainframe one day during a crisis, no less, and he got fired. So I got groomed into that spot, and so that's where system programming took off for me.
Did you happen to give him the Star Trek by then?
I was just gonna say, I recall somebody up here, the Trekkie.
Oh yes, very much so. Yes. I'm sorry?
I think I still have that.
Oh.
So all of you have seen things change over the years. Are there some key moments where you saw, particularly VM or the different products over the years, change that stuck out to you more than others in terms of impact, either to yourself in your career or to the business or both?
Yes. Well, I'll start. In my case, it was when Linux came out. Just like Phil, I was stuck over Christmas break in 1999 and downloaded the Marist Linux distribution and installed it, and just fell in love with it from there, because it just made a lot of sense to me. And from there, we ultimately got SUSE Linux, the supported version of SUSE Linux, and started running WebSphere on it, developing applications. Unfortunately, it didn't last too long, because at the time I was at Grady Foundries, which is where a lot of people might know of me from. They ultimately got rid of their mainframe in early 2000s.
No accounting for taste.
I know.
Well, I would say, well, Linux is the obvious big shift. I mean, nationwide, we were the poster children for Linux on Z. It was great for us. It was a lot of work. But I go back, and it's CMS pipelines. When CMS pipelines came out, I didn't want anything to do with it. It was so obscure, it just didn't make any sense. But we started learning it. I think CMS pipelines is an amazing, powerful utility, and still is, and has just grown. It's one of those little, well, it's not really little, but it's a thing that made me love VM even more. That's
Nice.
with my trajectory over since 2000,
Right.
I'd have to say it's Linux.
Okay.
You know, yeah. I mean,
Rich scored first, though.
yeah.
Just for keeping score.
No, I get it.
But yeah, go ahead.
When I was there, I was at Merrill Lynch at the time in 2000, and I deployed it. And oddly enough, in 9/11, I ended up building a very large environment, recovering from Windows servers that were lost afterwards. And then from there, I moved on to obviously ADP and now City, and it's really overtaken my. I mean, I still am a VM guy.
Right.
Under the covers because I still run everything under VM, but you know Linux has really grown it, and it's given a different reason. And by the way, at Merrill we ran a major CMS based application, and you know this was secondary, you know, but obviously now it's become primary for me.
Did how much Linux change the landscape? Did you expect that, or is that a pleasant surprise? Or
No, it was fun to have.
Very much a surprise.
I think it was a surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, I right off the bat, I saw where I could use it for some, because we were so, again, I was at the time I was at Merrill, and there was so much distributed, and I could see us, some of the workload that we were doing those days it was difficult to move the data back, and we saw like just Samba shares. It was just something as easy to move data, and so I saw utility in it.
Okay.
I didn't think it was going to grow this big. That was complete surprise.
yeah, cool.
And it took off fast. I think it really took off fast. We're same boat. We found a lot of things we could use Linux for, but it was utility stuff. And then within a heartbeat, it was applications and databases and interconnects and all these things, business critical stuff coming up on Linux. So it was fast.
Some of you might remember the WAVE conference. I was at the WAVE conference in October 1999 when Dr. Karl-Heinz Strassemeyer had one slide that he talked about for 45 minutes because that's all they would let him talk about. And he basically talked about Linux and the port. And I was just amazed at the capabilities, possibilities of that.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about your careers have changed also in terms of what side of the desk you sat on. So yours, we'll have to spend some time with yours, but
I'm still trying to figure mine out.
both of you were customers and now supporting customers.
I think all three of us were.
Well, yes, but
Yeah.
you were like, you go back
Yeah,
and forth.
I did. I ran around a lot.
Tell me about that. Is that when you moved from being a customer to supporting customers, was it what you expected? Was it better, different?
Is
Well,
my
an
boss
easy
in
change?
I see Barton and so
I can edit this out.
Okay.
Or just block Bart from the YouTube channel.
Yeah, being a customer for 35 years did not prepare me for not being a customer and being on the other side. So some of you are customers, and I love you all dearly. But the first thing that I was told, when I got to Velocity Software was,
about that.
customers always lie. And I was a fresh, off-the-shelf customer coming into this environment, and I didn't believe them. I got my first customer call. I believed them. So the smartest person on the other end of the phone, you ask them questions, and they tell you answers like, what did you change? I didn't change anything. Oh, okay. So why does that look different? Well, we updated that part. So you changed it. Anyway, I was not prepared for that. There's a lot of other things that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. It gave me a completely new perspective on customer support. And okay, I'm not pushing Velocity Software, but our emphasis is on our customers, and we pay attention very closely, very quickly to our customer requirements and their needs.
Sunrise.
But a lot of you're out of the picture. But a lot of companies don't necessarily do that. I really see what value that is to the customer, to the companies, to provide that. And I am really glad I moved over.
I had a little bit of a circuitous path to customer support. I went from having a real job, and Barton's not in the room, to doing consulting for quite a while. And then I went came to Velocity to do customer support. So I've kind of almost seen all three sides of the equation. But like James, I have a whole new appreciation for the people that are taking the calls or answering the emails and dealing with back and forth. Thank God, in a certain respect, for things like Zoom and WebEx, where we can actually just get on a call real quick to do video sharing and that kind of thing, so that we can see what's going on.
Show me what you were lying about. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Show me your lies.
So, yeah, that's helped quite a bit. As much as it's cut down my travel significantly, it's helped quite a bit.
And you, Phil, there was a period, are we allowed to talk about your IBM days?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. So you've been.
Yeah. So, out of college, I was doing federal consulting with air traffic control. You know, and the contract we were on was second level support for the live air traffic control system. So
That's not important, is it?
No, not at all. And then I moved around, and I was actually at an air traffic site, and I couldn't do the commute anymore. And then I started working for Comdisco.
Okay.
So disaster recovery services, where I, by the way, was the guy who built all the MVS systems for all the customers and the VM systems. So, I actually have some ZOS background. Where did I go after that? Oh, that's I got hired by a bank in the city because I pulled their butts out of a fire on a DR test that didn't go very well for them, and I fixed it. And they said a month later they called me up and said, "Do you want a job?"
Is that because there was suddenly an opening?
No, they realized they didn't have anyone who knew the job. So,
Excellent.
yeah. So, and then I went to the city, and then I ended up leaving the city after a while because during mergers, acquisitions of banks, I ended up maintaining an email product from a Volvo Ericsson technology company and I found this contract opening at Merrill Lynch. I was hired. This is my contract I was given a 3-year contract at Merrill Lynch. You and VM will be out of the building after 3 years. That was the contract I had. I don't remember. I think I was there 8 years. And I left after 7 years. I became an employee and the reason I became an employee is one of the employees that reported to me, of the 5 Merrill employees that were reporting to the consultant, one of them was really upset that he was reporting to a consultant.
Problem solved.
So I lasted as an employee for 18 months, and that's what what died him because I had to get the hell out. It was an insane place to work as an employee.
Yeah.
So, but the interesting part, you would think I'd go as a technical job. I went as in the sales side. I had to go to IBM sales school, which was kind of funny.
For you or for them?
Both. So, but yeah, But then my job was to run around the country installing ZVM and Linux and deploying. And at one point, getting deployed when there was a problem at customer sites. Phil, you got to go. Okay, whatever. So
that was a sales job, but
it was on the sales team. Right. It was the technical person on the sales team. Yeah, but the only thing that got me there was travel, because I was 100% travel.
Yeah.
And that just drained on you after a while.
Yeah, it does.
And then one of my former managers at Merrill was at one of my customers, and he offered me a job at ADP. And we kind of grew that environment from like 150 Linux guests to 8,000 or something. Yeah.
Quickly.
Relatively quickly. There was like 60 LPARs in 3 data centers. And we made a lot of mistakes because there was really nobody else doing it at scale.
Right.
And I think when I finally left there, we were around 900 IFLs, and I thought that was big. Until my current position. 4 years ago, just 4 years ago, I'm still shocked what happened in 4 years. I landed at Citi. They were doing Mongo on the databases on Linux, on Z. And I think when I finally got there, it was like 25 LPARs. And about 5 or 6 of them were what we considered legacy LPARs, because they had VM in Citi for forever. And some of those legacy LPARs were supporting TPF and supporting some CMS apps, some little Linux things here and there, and then Mongo. Over the next 2 years, 25 grew to 203 LPARs, 20 different Linux One boxes spread around the world, and about 3,500 IFLs now.
Yikes.
And
Are you busy yet?
well, 2 weeks ago, my boss retired. Oh yeah, that's true. One of those little apps that ran on the legacy VM was an application we called Box. And Box was one Linux guest without any backup for it. There was COB, there was disaster recovery, but if that server gone down, you would have to go to another data center to recover it. It was, and by the way, that was only fixed last weekend. It's the interface for Citi to SWIFT. Does anyone know what SWIFT is? It's the international banking system. The $7 trillion worth of dollar transfers a day. And we had one Linux guest backing it up. I'm like, the first day I was hired at Citi, I was told by my boss, Martin, he goes, there's an application called Box. If you touch it and you fix it, you're fired. And that was it. Joe touched it. He did fix it. And now at least it has recovered, has another site in the same site that we can get back up to. But yeah. And yeah. Lowered the blood pressure a little. Especially since I now own the ZOS it talks to, where the rest of the box runs, the rest of the Swift workload. So now, and 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, the head of TPF retired. And they said, Phil, can you cover this while we get a replacement? Of course. Sure, why not? And then 2 weeks ago, my boss retired that owned all the mainframe. And now I own 180-something ZOS LPARs. Yeah. And the 200.
Once you do one,
What's the difference?
It goes round off here. Okay. Well, let the record show that the witness identified Joe Camentini
As the one who tucked it.
was that a lifeline kind of deal?
By the way, Joe Camentini came from ADP as well.
Remember, you gave me my first Z-Linux guest at Merrill back in 2008.
Yes, I did. And when I was at ADP, at IBM, he was my customer.
Right? So you really are an accomplice to
Yes,
as well.
we've been tracking each other for a few years. Yeah. So.
Going to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about community. And we'll start with share. So one of the things that I'd been thinking about, especially with you, James, was you saw a lot of things through Share because you were involved in that very heavily. And one of the things that always struck me was that there were a lot of things that came from the VM part of that sort of proliferated out in terms of like mascots. You know, VM was the first for that and stuff. From my viewpoint, it's just an IBM where I didn't pay attention. I couldn't vote. I didn't care. Are there things from that era that struck you in terms of why VM was influential in that space as it was back then?
My personal opinion is I think the attitude of our of the VM community is way different. I mean, we tend to be more warm and fuzzy, like a teddy bear. We're helpful, you know. We're more receptive. I just think it's the way the VM community worked together and influenced the rest of the organization itself. Internally, a lot of people don't realize this, but through the leadership of Share, throughout the decades of Share, nearly all the directors of operations came from VM. So they always came up through the VM community, the VM group, one way or another. And then some continued on, like to be president, to run the whole thing. So, but it was exciting. The other thing too that I noticed is that the VM group at Share would have, you know, like events or the VM nights every 5 years would do that, or a birthday party or whatever the case may be. And the rest of the leadership and other areas of Share would participate with us. Mm-hmm. So we would get a lot of influx from the entire organization of Share. It was just, like I said, I just think it was the people that drew others into the VM community.
Cool.
I would say community. So the first time I ever gave a presentation was at an MVMUA. Jeff Sabat suggested I do it, and I had just gone to Manufacturers Hanover to do ZVM and do the DR stuff. Mm-hmm. I never presented before, but it was he was the one who was like, I would go to the meetings, you know, and one day he's like, well, he knew that I had installed the latest version of VM. He said, why don't you come up and do a presentation on it? You know, and nice. Obviously, I've never had a problem talking, so
I have that in my notes.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, it was the community that got me to do it. It was like, yeah, come on up.
Encouragement. Yeah.
It was the encouragement from the community.
So for those that aren't familiar, MVMUA is the Metropolitan VM Users Association. So in the greater New York City, I guess it used to be more in Philadelphia as well, but I guess one of the longest user groups running around. But yeah, Rich. So you mentioned Wave earlier. That was another user group community and stuff. And for a while, I thought of you as a VSC guy. I know Wave was one of those things that straddled both VM and VSC. Can you talk at all about that kind of community and
I think it's very similar to the VM workshop. A lot of the stuff a lot of that community involvement that from Share and Wave has translated very strongly to the VM workshop. Me being in customer support for so long now, helping people, solving problems and fixing things is kind of second nature. But even that came from days going to Wave and Share for, 20 years before the reincarnation of the VM workshop even started.
Right. Cool. Let's shift gears again a little bit. I think it's related to community, but over the years, how did you all learn stuff?
I haven't learned anything yet.
That's also on my notes. I mean, in terms of were conferences your go-to thing, or manuals, or mentors, or some combination thereof?
it was definitely a combination.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of
It was
that.
also under fire. You know, when things failed miserably, and all of a sudden, holy cow! Like 3 months into my job at Merrill, where I was getting rid of VM,
Right.
which I failed at miserably, by the way.
Yeah.
The VM system crashed at 2 in the afternoon. Not this whole system, just the file system that all of our business workload was on. And I had never used the product, the backup, restore products before, because they ran. Everything ran. It was, yeah, you end up learning really quickly when you have people sitting there in front of you going, when's it going to work?
It's gonna work. Now, did that happen to be take your child to work day?
No.
And somebody asked what the red button did?
No.
Just checking.
No.
Because I hear that happen.
Yeah, just an Endicott, though.
When the badge readers went in after that.
Getting information now is a lot different than it was
Yeah.
even 20, 30 years ago. The very first thing I had to do when I became a system programmer was installing CA Top Secret for VSE, which, for those of you that don't know, it's a security product. It does batch and online security. And the system programmer said, well, okay, here's the tape. Yes, because yes, we had to do tape at the time. And the manuals, go for it. Here's the test system. Just play. And that's how we got things done. It was kind of under fire, not so much fire, but you're on a live system, you're doing things, and trying to get stuff to work. Today, it's mostly Google searches. That's what I do mostly. I mean, okay, I have a stack of manuals on my laptop that I break out on occasion if I need to find something. But if I need to find something really quick, like a ZOS error message, I'll just Google it.
Yeah, mine's a multitude. First thing is I learned what not to do from
The red button.
When I was a systems programmer, fresh systems programmer, my mentor, who's in this room, told me, enter this command and hit enter. So I did, and some of you will understand this when you hit enter and you get the X system and it doesn't go away. Oops. Yeah. No, it wasn't like that. But at that time, we had people in problem determination, and they were standing behind me within moments, saying, "What did you do?" So anyway, so I learned a lot from peers to start off with, because they didn't get to where they were just by mistake. So I learned a lot from people. I learned a lot from going to conferences back VM Software, Sterling Software, whatever their name du jour was at the time.
Yeah.
That's where I really started. Got a lot out of Share, especially around the Linux content. So that was a big one. But honestly, for me, I got most of my background and knowledge and love, really, of what I'm doing through IBM classes. The whole week CP internals class in New York City, learning VM says in depth for multitudes of days, and just being able to immerse yourself and have the experts there. It was pretty awesome. The in-person stuff is where I learned the most.
Cool.
And for me, it was a lot of hands-on, and it taught me very early on, you have to have a test place. You have to have some place where you can break it.
Safe place to break. Yep.
Because and I actually learned that at the air traffic. I would literally get an air traffic control system for myself at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was doing operating system updates. So I was making, and you'd watch it crash, and you go, okay, that wasn't right. But it didn't break anything, because you would literally sit there and we'd step through the code, and they go, oh, I see what I did wrong. And one of the first things I did when I got to my current job was I set up 4 LPARs, and I said, guys, they're not production. You need some place to figure it out. And I continue to say that. You have to have a place. You got to teach it to yourself sometimes. Even if somebody goes to class, you have to go back and figure out the details yourself. And, whether it's a Linux guest that you can throw away and rebuild it again, or in my case, a VM LPAR or second level VM system, You need a place to, you gotta teach yourself a lot.
Cool. Yeah, now James mentioned mentor. Rich and Phil, were there mentors in your careers, or were they too busy playing Star Trek?
Definitely a mentor. The senior system programmer at the time when I just started off, his name, for what it's worth, his name is John Pikett, a very sharp guy. He was definitely a mentor for many years. Yes.
Cool.
I've had different ones over the years. Like when I was doing air traffic, we had a retired air traffic controller on staff. His title was something like QA, but really all he was, because none of us knew what air traffic, how a plane's, we didn't know air traffic control. We just were doing computer work. So we'd go over to him and we'd ask him, can the plane do this? You know, what are the rules?
Tell me about gravity.
No, but if you're coding something in it, you wanted to know,
Right.
can you where are the parameters? And he would sit there and he'd be able to walk it through. So, and then over the years, that's where I learned, that was my first learning of VM there.
Okay.
Because it was all running this air traffic control system, second level under a VM. So we would, later on when we were able to do that, because it's the predecessor to TPF, by the way, so, for those who don't know.
All right, I'm going to open it up to questions out there. I reserve the right to not ask them the question. But anything you're curious about, any one of these three or all three, I am off limits. Anyone?
Did you work in Pomona?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
FAA Tech Center in Pomona. And I went to college in Stockton State College in Pomona.
A little bit of news, the Haitian national team is based out of Stockton. For the World
Right,
Cup.
for the World Cup. And that's the only airport I've ever landed in with my son as a pilot. He flew, we took off from one airport, we landed in Atlantic City International, which is in Pomona. And all I remember is we're in a Piper Cub, and I hear the air traffic controller tell the guy in the 727 ahead of us, "Don't rev your engines, you'll blow them over." I'm like, what am I doing here?
It blows my mind that you fit in Piper Cub.
I wasn't going to go there, but I'm glad somebody did.
My son's the same height as me, so
Dude, geez, that poor
he
plane.
did add more
He's
fuel.
totally back.
He did add more fuel on his side than my side to balance it. So
No, by the way, I had, in the early 2000, we had a contract maintaining that system also, and also a lot of the people were still there.
Other questions? Rick?
If the fairy godmother came and you could have one wish for the future of ZVM, what would it be?
let me think about that.
One wish. And you can't wish for three wishes.
Phil, you're speechless?
No, I'm trying to let it to the highest priority one.
Yeah, so the question for those listening to this recording was, if a fairy godmother came along and granted you one wish about VM, what would it be?
I'm going to start and say a very long life
Okay.
Per VM.
for VM. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it would have to revolve around something with the ability to teach management the reality of Linux on Z, instead of making decisions based on hearsay and not
Airline
facts.
magazine.
So, yeah.
I'm going to go a little more technical here. With the advances in the machines that we're running on, continuing to allow it to virtualize those advances. There's things missing today, and there's things probably going to be missing in the future that, if they put the right effort in, ZVM can provide, or any version of VM later on can provide that virtualization layer, because it really does add value. And I've done scale, so I know, There's just some things. I know 10 years ago, it might have been 10, it was probably 10 years ago, there was talk of a lab test in Poughkeepsie that was kind of under the covers where they ran quote-unquote x86 code on a Z box. And I thought to myself, why can't I IPL x86? Because if the code can do it, VM should be able to do it. And, you know, it was an experiment, and it kind of worked, but I'm thinking, in the future, if the machine can do it, why can't VM virtualize it? And that's what I would say. Make sure it keeps up with the machine it's running on, so it doesn't get pushed off to the side.
Other questions? Okay. Let's see.
Oh,
Uh-oh, you got another one.
Yes.
Do you have any regrets professionally?
oh, you had to quantify it.
Oh. So the question again was, do you have any regrets professionally?
Yes. Joining a little consulting company, no, not working. No. Joining a little consulting company in Texas, that was a huge regret because I had it written into my contract with them that I could still support, or we could still support Grady Foundries. I was adamant about that because they needed a lot of help. Excuse me. I left them, went to Velocity Software actually, and Velocity picked up the contract to support Grady Foundries for the year or two that was left with their mainframe. I got sued by the little company in Texas, and got a lawyer, and they saw the contract and told them to go away. And he went away because it's in the contract.
Nice.
So yeah, I regretted working. He was kind of a schlockmeister. I needed a job. What could I do? You know,
I get it.
some of you might know him. You can ask me later who it is, but you might know.
Mine was revolving around my first job, my first career. What I learned from it is important, but back then I wish I knew then what I know now. And that is, if you get up in the morning and you go, I don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this. And you do that for more than a week or a month or a year, that's bad. You've got to make a change. I did not realize that until it was, I don't want to say it was too late, but it was to the point where it was just terrible, awful situation going into work. I hated it. The second worst part of, or the second regret I had in that line was I gave the company a month before I terminated. I should have given them an hour. I kid thee not. That was a big mistake. So I should have known when to pull the plug and get out.
So obviously I've been in a lot of places, and I think that's why I don't have as many regrets, because I did what you said. This is not a place to be. I got to figure out how to get out of here. When I was at Merrill, as an employee, I knew I had to get out of there because the politics was just, and I just, so do I have regrets? Yes. Like when I was doing air traffic control and I was writing all these assembly programs and they were doing some stuff on Sun, I should have learned Unix back then because it would have really helped me, 10, 15 years later. But, things like that, but they're minor. What I was luckily, it wasn't always the best professional thing in the sense that, I had to start over at a new job, but mentally, in the long run, it was the best thing to do. And it's a piece of advice I've given my kids: find something you want to do and do it every day, or else it's painful.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that none of you have regretted signing up for this.
Wait, we signed up.
Oh, we're still young.
Good question. Clayton.
So you guys have obviously been to VM for a long time. What's your favorite feature you've seen added to VM over the years?
Oh my.
Wow.
I'm going to take a page out of James's book and include.
So the question was, what are their favorite feature that was added to VM over the years?
Yeah, I'm going to take a page out of James's book here and go with the inclusion of the full pipelines in the CMS. Yes, and I like the vSwitch idea. Yep, vSwitch was awesome.
Was good.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that happened in
I'm going to do one that
time
I was heavily involved in. It was the MLAG vSwitch.
Oh, were you involved in that?
A little. There was a little cursing involved in that. There was a lot of cursing involved in that. But yeah, the whole networking ability, because it made VM much more usable as a virtualization platform. Yeah, and nothing against, I agree with pipelines. It was like when they put the whole, it was one less thing you had to download and install yourself because everyone needed it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, let's jump off of MLAG a little bit in terms of over the years working with IBM on features or functions or collaboration or whatever. Do you feel that's changed? Has it gotten better or worse? About the same? Like the eye doctor, 1, 2, or about the same?
I'm gonna be honest. It's gotten worse.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm with you there.
Sorry to hear that.
The best place that I found to get enhancements and things done was at Share. We'd be sitting in a conference room somewhere, and Romney would be typing with one hand and talking to me with another. Do you know if anybody knows the CP logon here or logon at command? That came from a discussion I was having with Romney in a room, shooting the breeze, and telling them it would be cool if our operators could have their console back by allowing a logon at that terminal without them having to screw around with it because they really don't know how to do it. He goes, oh, okay. About a week later, he sends me a module, and it's done. So that doesn't happen today. I don't see that happening today. I think the ears are there. I think people listen still. I mean, there are some good key people left, but a lot of the well, dang, that sounds good, I'm just going to do it kind of attitudes, it seems to be missing.
I've had times when, in recent past, when I've gotten things done. I mean, the day they shoot Snappy, there'll be fireworks, by the way. Yeah. But yeah, it's.
Well,
the next big surprise, big thing will be when they shoot SSI because it's useless.
Uh-oh. Well, on that note, next page.
It's not useful for you.
What do I care?
So let me go back to rule number 1. Nobody gets hurt. And number 2 is we're all friends when this is over. Assuming we were friends before. But no. So,
Wait. Yeah.
is there, Rick, do you have a question?
Yeah, since this is for all three of the friends, since working with VM, have you ever had work where you didn't have VM? And
Yes.
What was that like?
When I first started at Grady Foundries, there was no VM. That was a dark time. I convinced the manager to get VM. I actually wrote a paper about it, and convinced him to get VM for all the good reasons you would need VM, test systems and all that kind of business. But yes, it was. Yes, I've been there.
other than working at Burger King,
Nice.
I got nothing.
When I was doing the email, even though we were supposed to support something ran on VM, but they didn't have a VM system to test it, so we had. So, but that was only like 9 months. The funny part is, at the same time, I had a consulting contract to do VM conversion of RSCS to Rex RSCS. So I still was doing it, but it was a different job.
So that doesn't count.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Because I would like to ask this of the friends, but they're not retired yet, Mr. Bittner. So it's just a curious thing. And now that you're retired, you ever want to scratch that itch?
So every now and then, there are some things that I'd like to do that I knew I could do in pipelines, and I don't have it.
Bill, I have a question for you. Have you ever supported PROS? The email system?
No, I know what the email props was. In fact, when I was at Merrill, there might have been 50 users left. It was supposed to be, it was one of those things where it was there. Because Merrill had a very long history of CVM before I was there. So there was still a small profs group, but as people would retire or leave the company, they just dwindled away. I never actually had to support it because it was set up for like thousands of people. There was 50 people left, so it kind of self-maintained.
I heard about that. Philip Morris used to have about 6,000 PROS users.
Yeah, I never had to support it, but I remember I was a consultant at Johnson & Johnson in Racine, Wisconsin for a little while, and I remember they had it there. I was probably just a user. But I do remember querying their system and seeing their 20,000 users logged on. I thought, holy crap. Yeah.
I had a customer in Brazil that had 120,000 logins with Boeing on OS390.
Okay.
Yeah. It was working on.
Go ahead.
Do y'all have a favorite part of your career and you can't say right now?
A favorite part of your career other than right now. So a second favorite part.
I think I'm in my favorite part right now, honestly.
You can't say your favorite.
No, not here.
Just immediate.
I'm at my current job, my current career with the company I'm at, and the team of people that I work with. It is fantastic. And Phil said it, you got to love your work, you got to find something you love to do. I found something I love to do. I have not ever gotten up and said, why am I doing this while I've worked here?
Except when I called.
Except when he calls. He sends me a message at 6:30 in the morning, says, good morning. I said, oh, shit. You can cut that.
No, he's not.
That'll be a separate short.
Rated R.
Yeah. The whole Linux explosion, and the last two jobs, it's all been about architecting how to. It's a change in scale, and so that's now. My new job from 2 weeks ago is so new that I'm not going to answer for that. That's still too new.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm going to take two stabs at that. One was when I was working at Grady Foundries. That was I thought that was an awesome job for as long as it lasted. I was the primary support, which is good and bad, for VM and the VSE systems. I did pretty much everything. I interfaced with the programmers, I interfaced with the users, I interfaced with management. I did a little systems work on the side. But that I loved having that job. And again, the only problem was I was the only one doing it, so time off was a challenge. But working with Velocity is awesome in itself. It's a whole different kind of mindset. I do a lot of different things. I don't just write code all day. I do customer support. I do systems management. So I have a lot of different things to keep my mind busy instead of just sitting down writing code all day.
I think that's as my job title has been in multiple times, VM systems programmer.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is there's a big difference between a VM systems programmer and an MVS systems programmer or ZOS, whatever, because we typically, at one point I had databases, networking, DASD support, operating system support, and typically in a ZOS world, you're one of those.
Yeah.
And you're specializing, whereas you know, you're at a VM shops, they typically were smaller. Again, current environment different, but we still do this, all of it. We're our DASD support, we're our networking support. We have a network team, but we usually tell them what we need to have them do for us, because when you tell them, they don't tell us. So yeah, I think that's one of the uniquenesses about this, is that you tend to be much more a broader work, which makes it less boring.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, let's wrap it up with
What was your worst diaper loading experience? Like you accept .com and you're like, I do not. Oh boy.
So the
I
question
give you that.
was, what was the scariest moment?
I was working at the New York ARTCC en route air traffic control system production. I was sitting in my office, and the way the air traffic, everything was separate power supply. So if one of my terminals was lit up, I would work on it, because the other one was dead, because that was production, and I wasn't allowed to touch a production system. And all of a sudden, I'm working, and the other one lit up. I went down to the data center, and luckily I used to be the second support team. I was on the team that used to support the local systems, and I called them up. I go, I got this dump. What's wrong? And they're immediately, and there's something about air traffic. No one raises voices. It's very calm. We have the fix for that. It has to be applied within the next 15 or 20 minutes, or else your other production system will go down.
Good to know.
And at that point, I had to plug the jack in for the RSCS link, because we were not allowed to keep the phone connected. Everything had to be disconnected. We made the phone call the RSCS. They shipped the package to us. We unplugged the cable, and I had to load that in. So that's en route air traffic control in New York covers Boston to Washington to Pittsburgh, and all inbound from Europe air traffic. And this was like at 11 o'clock in the morning. So it was a little busy time.
James?
So mine was when I was at Nationwide. I'm sure Rick's going to groan when he hears this one. They were doing concurrent microcode upgrades on the Z. And there was a PTF that was supposed to be put on VM to handle this concurrent microcode upgrade. This guy knows about it. It took our production systems out. So this was back in the heyday of Linux and on CVM at Nationwide, and it's just exploding. I mean, we've got, I don't remember what kind of load we had. It was huge. We re-IPL'd one of our LPARs to bring our systems up, and all the servers are starting up and stuff, and then the system went, couldn't bring it up. So we're like, what the hell's going on? We spent, I don't know how many hours, started a crit sit with IBM. Turns out that we were just overstressing ZVM beyond the capabilities and every possible limit that we could think of, or we were doing. We were just pushing it too hard. But it was I don't know how many hours we spent. And it was sweating. I mean, you start the LPAR and you're like, come on, please start. This is production. And you've got management behind you going, is it done? Is it done? When's it done? What's going on? So that was just huge. That was diaper loading time. And honestly, I mean, Bill helped us with a decision of you just need to go to the next release of ZVM and it'll fix your problem. And I literally did a ZVM upgrade while the management's standing there watching me, and we IPL'd and it came up.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was fun.
Now it sounds
Has therapy helped?
sit there, although
I've got a few. I'm just trying to pick one that is one that I remember the whole story for, first of all. I remember I was a consultant. I was working at a company north of Milwaukee doing some consulting work, and I was there in like the middle of the night doing something. I don't remember why. Maybe, I don't know if they called me or what. But I remember being so tired and I'm sitting at the keyboard just hitting random keys, and I could not keep my eyes open. But yeah, it's and somehow I ended up bringing down CSES or something, and yeah, that's okay. Wake the hell up, get the job done.
Well, join me in thanking my three panelists up here. I think this has been fun. I've worked it out.
Now that we kill him.
Yeah.
Now that we